Now, the interesting thing to me was I showed that same tape a year later, and I was playing it for some of the guys over in the Army, over in Germany. And I was sitting there, and the lights were out, and we're watching the video on the screen. And I'm sitting there with my arm on the edge of the chair. And I'm kind of dozing off because it's the end of the afternoon. You know how you feel now. You know, you're kind of tired, and it's, okay, we'll get this last bit and go home happy. So I'm sitting there, and I fall off the chair. Okay? And as I'm falling off the chair...
That's cool in front of your Army client, too.
Yes.
You know?
As I'm falling off the chair, I look up, and there I am on the tape. Okay, and he's going, and I want to tell you one more story. So when people ask us about anchors, auditory anchors, I know I got one that lasted a good year.
I always thought, for those of you who've seen the Nick and Mondi tapes they made of Milton.
Anybody see those?
Yeah. They brought Nick and Mondi back. These are 2 one-hour interviews, videotape. They're marvelous. At least what I can remember of them. I've showed these. I used to, by the way, when I was running the practice, I just put these out in the waiting room on a loop. And those things just were on a cassette. And on my cassette deck, I have a Panasonic that automatically rewinds and then starts over again. I just left them in the waiting room, going on and on and on. And then when I'd open the door and I'd go, next. I never had to do inductions. So just come an hour early. I'd have them come in an hour early and they'd watch on the TV. Right? But they showed Nick and Mondi these tapes, right? Because Nick and Mondi both claimed afterwards that they really didn't have any memory of what went on. So the psychiatrist that actually produced these 2 movies spent a lot of money to make these because he couldn't write, and he said he felt like he should leave something, you know, behind, you know, of importance. So they went down and made these 2 movies. That's why he's the guy in the introduction, you know, who goes, what the following is going to be, you know, I don't know why they do that. Don't they feel foolish? You know, only this one, it's a little different because the guy's like this, he's going, you're about to see the work of Milton H. Erickson. He looks like a fully programmed human being. Milton used to do this. See, Milton was good enough that Milton used to send me messages in a person. You know, this guy would come up and go, I must see you. Milton said, I have to see you. And I'd say, sure. I'd say, come on over. I'd come over, and he'd walk in, he'd sit down, and he'd go. And I'd hear, hello, Richard. This is a message from Milton. Do you know you're a loaf of bread? And if you know what a loaf of bread is, please respond appropriately. So I figured it was like one of those, you know, message machines. And so I went, and I said, hey, Milton, I don't know what a loaf of bread is when somebody calls me. Because actually it wasn't just me, it was me and John. So I said, the guy, I said, in a moment you will arouse yourself. Since I can use Milton's tonality, everyone he hypnotized. I went and gave a lecture in front of the OSCH, all the people in Milton's organization, American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. And I walked up and I said, now, I'd like to introduce, none of them had met me before, but I just walked up in front of the podium and I said, now, I don't know many of you, but you asked me to come here to tell you about my new book about Milton H. Erickson of Phoenix, Arizona. And on the way down here, I went inside and I thought of all my experiences of Milton. And by that time, I had full eye closure from the whole audience, and half of them already had levitation. So I sent this guy, I gave him a suggestion, and sent him back to Milton. About a week later, this guy shows up at my house again, right? There's no knock on the door. I just opened the door and the guy's out there. And so I looked at him and I said, come on in. And the guy sat down and he went, and said, Richard, You could have just called. You have my phone number. I don't have yours. He said, that's why you and John are a loaf of bread. And I waited, tapped the guy on the head. I knew there had to be more, but no, there was no more. So I, my inevitable style, went beep, sent the guy back with a message that said, Milton, I don't know what a loaf of bread is, but my phone number is. So then I got a call from Milton. And Milton said, I'm sending you a letter. You promised Betty that you were going to give her copies of the photographs that you took of me and of all the tapes you made and of the articles that you have by me that we had no copies of at all. Now, that letter will either tell you why you and John are a loaf of bread, or you'll always be one without knowing. And a loaf of bread is just two heels with a lot of crumb in between. It's a lot of work for that message, isn't it? Anyway, Milton had a funny sense of humor, but he did a lot of things for a lot of people. Very powerful man. Very strange, though. You hear that, Milton? Sometimes I wonder. He was, from the time I met him until, God, how many years? Because when I met him, Bateson set me down because they figured he was going to be dead in a few months. And I wanted to, 10 years after that. And he still was always trying to do things like, since what his cure was get a job, right, get married and have children. Lots of children. Right. The funny thing is all the people that went down there, he ended up getting a job, getting married and having children. Now, me, he'd always have to go, Richard, what job do you do? And I'd go, oh, Milton, I don't have a job. And he goes, people really should have a job if they want to live in our society. And I go, well, I kind of have a job, Milton. I'm a corporate president. And exactly what does a corporate president do when he's at work, as opposed to when he's at home with his wife and family? Now, Milton's ability to get those results, to do all kinds of things, to help people who had cancer, and I mean, he did all kinds of amazing things. He cured Angie's allergies, because that was the problem that Angie had. Angie, with their little dog there, was sitting there. She was cute. I'd take her home with me. She was the biggest damn kid I ever saw, though. She weighed about 220. But she had terrible allergies. And Milton took her back to the age of 5 and introduced her to the things that she was allergic to in such a way that she didn't have to, but hallucinated ones. But I can't remember what the 3 things were she was allergic to, but he introduced her to those things and had to take a little bit of that every day so that it would never bother her. And do that, and he brought her up to 12, and when she was 12 years old, he gave her a talk about sex, and then about controlling her eating habits. Because when he finally got her back up to her present age, we went, being the scientists we are, we had a trunk load of this shit, But we always, my thing is, if somebody said they had a phobia of elevator, throw them in. And if they kick and scream, then sure enough, I'll take them as a client. If they don't, I won't. I just push the button. Every now and then I hit the button by accident. But it's the same way I test my work, because I want to know that it does it. Milton was the same way. So we took her out and threw her in the trunk of the car. And she had no allergic reaction. Now, the other thing is that when we brought her back in, Milton said, I would like to say goodbye to your unconscious mind for a while, because I have a matter that it has had to deal with for years and has done a very tremendous job. She weighed about 220. But I want to ask, what are you waiting for? Because I think it's time you stopped waiting in just that way. Shrink your problems down. Maybe not all at once, but just a little each time. Consider the fact that when you eat food and you're hungry, you get full. And when you get full, you don't eat anymore. You're full. Enough. So what you can do is to make up, because you only need a little bit to survive for a while. And then, of course, as Milton always would do, he would then tell her the story about the bears and about how they eat all this stuff and then they hibernate. And the thing is when you put a bear in a zoo, he said, that's where the bear has to be around other human beings. It has to learn how to not hibernate and eat and eat and eat and gain all that fat tissue and then sleep away from people. But now that the bear is going to sleep with other people, it's going to have to learn to maintain its balance and weight in a way that's appropriate, because the Phoenix Zoo is very small. Do you understand me, Angie? But he was a real sweetheart, too. One thing about Milton and me, though, is that it was very clear from the beginning we didn't like each other. But it didn't interfere with us being able to work together. That's another characteristic of somebody. See, most people don't realize it, but John and I never really got along that well. Never did. People always thought we were bosom buddies. We don't have the same taste in anything. And besides, you know, if you're going to ride horses, I'm not into riding horses. I certainly wouldn't put the corral next to the house. You know, and it's like, there's something about the smell of horses that's just not my thing. And I'm sure that the things that I do, for example, John isn't much of a drinker. So for John to go out and spend an evening with me, you know, that's a lot of club soda, or else it's a bad hangover. But Milton was like that. So Milton and I sort of worked it out in a way where we took turns in unconscious language, taking pot shots at one another on an ongoing basis. For example, I used to say to Milton, he would tell me stories about young whippersnappers, you know, who thought they were this or that, but they were actually too big for their britches, right? And if they didn't watch out, they might fall down when they least wanted them to. And I would look at him and I'd say, yes, and you know, the one thing that I found, Milton, is that sometimes, you know, people do things behind my back, and I make them realize that in a way, messing with a 5th-degree black belt is stupid, because, you know, it'd be like a cripple fighting with a man who's not. He might take your wheelchair and push it right out into the middle of the street. He might even make it such that you found yourself doing it. And he'd go, he always loved a good fight. But I always found one thing about Milton that I could do that made it so that I could go down and get, because I used to literally, I wanted to know specifically how he covertly induced color blindness. So what I do is I just, you know, go down, and I'd either bring somebody or I'd just tell him, I'd point at the empty chair, and I'd go, just do what you did. I said, Milton, you can hallucinate someone there, and just give me the induction, because I wanted the cadence. And I mean, I just sat there with my pencil and took my notes and wrote it. I did it all on sheet music, by the way, so I had the melodies. Well, it does seem to work, doesn't it? And he would just be, but he would be happy as a lark and gave me no problems if I brought beautiful women with me. And I showed up by myself, Milton would always look up at me and go, "Where are the girls?" And I'd go, "Oh, well, Milton, they're right behind." He goes, "We'll wait. You can just sit back and close your eyes and relax." But he always liked, and especially why he liked, was the girls that I brought weren't psychotherapists. Because he had a thing, I saw lots of people come in, women that were psychotherapists. And the thing is they were good trance subjects and stuff. But the thing is that they always wanted to know if this was the same as that, is this the same as what Bandler was doing in '52? And they were always like this, because they knew they were going to get zapped into a trance. And they didn't want to make a fool of themselves and didn't realize they already were. The people I brought were always, cocktail waitresses who really didn't give a shit, They go, "Yeah, man, he's a weird old guy." And they go, "Why do you wear pajamas all the time?" Well, he dressed in purple pajamas because purple was the only color he could appreciate. Because he was colorblind and tone deaf now. Weird old guy. I'm sure somewhere floating amongst the universe is the cosmic dust from which he was made. And if somebody steps in it, I'm sure they're going to go to sleep.
I think it's time
To go up and up
out.
and up. And remember, everything you did here is an exercise. Everything you experienced, your unconscious mind knows how to motivate your conscious mind to practice and practice, explore, and to do it with a feeling of ecstasy as you walk out the door. See ya.